everyone, welcome to our third video about plants, and this is our final video, and this one's all about different things that plants do. So plants have different tissues, they grow continuously, they have different organs, they move water and nutrients, they reproduce, they respond to their environment, and they adapt. So first thing that plants do is having different tissues. There are three different types of tissues that can be found all throughout plants, whether it's in their leaves, stems, or roots. And those are called dermal tissues, vascular tissues, and ground tissues. And these are kind of listed here and shown here. The pink outer layer of the leaf, the stem, and the root is the dermal tissue. That's the outermost layer, and that can regulate what happens with water going into and out of the plant. Vascular tissue is the xylem and the phloem. That's shown in purple here. And that purple tissue is going to be able to move water in the xylem or nutrients in the phloem. And then the ground tissue is just kind of like the middle layer. It's almost like an animal's coelom. A plant's ground tissue is just kind of a middle layer, but in the case of plants, the ground tissue is very tough and strong and allows plants to stand tall and leaves to have their shape. All right, another thing plants do is that they grow continuously. So they grow at an area called the meristem. It's a tissue where plants make their new cells that can become any types of cells through the process of mitosis. And that happens for the plant's whole entire life. And there are different meristems throughout the plant. So there's like what's called like an apical meristem, can be like at the very root of the plant, and that can develop into new roots. But there can also be meristems that create new stems and new leaves. And you can often see them on like budding plants in the spring. You can sometimes see the meristem where a new stem is going to come off of that plant, or maybe even a new leaf is going to be formed. But plants do grow continuously throughout their lives. All right, so what is the outermost tissue in plants? That's dermal tissue. Which tissue contains the xylem and the phloem? That's vascular tissue. And which tissue is a strong middle layer of all plants' leaves, roots, and stems? That's called the ground tissue. All right, what is the tissue where plants make undifferentiated cells through the process of mitosis? That's called the meristem. All right, plants also have different organs. So just like animals do, like as a human, you have a heart that has a certain job as a heart organ. You have a brain, and that has a different job than your heart. And you have lungs, and your lungs have a different job. You have kidneys that get rid of your waste. So you have all different types of organs. So do plants. Their different organs are their roots, their stems, and their leaves if they are vascular plants. So this does not include the bryophytes, but all other plants have these different organs. So they have roots which actually anchor the plant into the ground, and you can see that. They also help bring water into the plant. Plants also have stems, which produce other parts. So basically from the stems, there are leaves that can come off of the stems, there are branches that can come off of the stems, and there are flowers that can come off of the stems. They also have a big job of holding the leaves up to the sun, and very importantly, stems actually transport material. So through the xylem and the phloem, stems move water and nutrients throughout the plant. Now, I want you to think about these two different types of growth that can happen with the stem. Primary growth is considered to be growing upward, and secondary growth means that the plant is growing outward, like kind of like how a bush would fill in as it continues to grow. All right, and then the third type of organ that I want to tell you about is leaves. And leaves have a super important job of doing photosynthesis and getting that sun energy to provide energy to the plant overall. Also, transpiration, which you might remember, is actually when water goes up into the roots, up the stem, and out through the leaves. So evaporation that happens through a plant is called transpiration. We talked about that way back with properties of water, but it's a good reminder. And then also gas exchange, so bringing carbon dioxide into the plant and letting oxygen out into the world is also part of the leaves' job. Oops, guys, sorry. I went a little bit backwards. That's also part of the leaves' job. So All right. Another thing that plants do is that they move water and nutrients throughout them, and root pressure or pressure on the roots moves water into the plants. So the roots have water coming in, and then adhesion and capillary action actually move water up. So water always goes in because of root pressure and up through adhesion and cohesion, and then out of the plant through transpiration. So water goes in, up, and out through root pressure, adhesion, and capillary action, and then transpiration through the leaves. And then in the phloem, nutrients can actually be moved in either direction. So that could be anything from like nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium, whatever kind of nutrients your plant needs. The nutrients can move up or down based on concentration within the phloem. So basically, they're either going to diffuse to move upward in the plant if they're needed there, or downward in the plant if they're not needed up at the top. So just as a big picture thing, water moves in, up, and out. Nutrients can move either up or down. So which part of the plant produces other parts like leaves, branches, and flowers, holds the leaves up, and transports material? That's the stem. What is one function of the leaf? Select all that are true. Photosynthesis, transpiration, and gas exchange are 3 functions of the leaf. Which part of the plant anchors it to the ground and absorbs water? That's the roots. All right, which direction do materials move in the phloem? So remember, that's nutrients in the phloem. What direction do they move? That's either up or down, depending on where they are needed. And in plants, water goes in, up, and out. But what makes water go in, what makes water go up, and what makes water go out is a 3-part answer. So root pressure makes water go in, adhesion and capillary action make water go up through the stem, and then transpiration makes water go out through the leaves. All right, another thing plants do is reproduction, and you might be seeing a lot of this going on right now because it is springtime and trees are in full bloom. But most plants use either cones or flowers. So cones are gymnosperms and flowers are angiosperms. But basically, they're going to be dispersing their pollen and seeds throughout the area around them to try to spread their DNA to the next generation. And that can happen through wind. Like you can see there, like the wind is blowing and that pine tree is got pollen coming off of it. It can happen through the help of animals like pollinators, so bees, butterflies, birds, and also through water. So think about like coconut trees, drop coconuts. That coconut could float to another island and grow a new coconut tree on that new island. Also, seeds can be dormant until the environment is right. So until there's proper temperature, proper moisture, and then the seeds will germinate. And that's why when you buy seed packs at the store, you don't have like fully germinated developing seeds. You just have like dormant seeds. And dormant is basically kind of like they're sleeping until the environment is right. All right, another thing plants do is they respond to their environments. So that can be phototrophism, which means growing towards the light. You can see that with this orchid here. The leaves are really growing towards the light. If you spun that, it would grow back to grow towards the light again. Gravitrophism means growing against gravity. So even though the pot like makes you think the plant might be growing out like this, it's actually growing upward against the force of gravity. Thigmotrophism means it's responding to touch. So you can see that there with this vine, that the vine actually touches and wraps around some nearby stick. So that's called thigmotrophism. Rapid response can occur too, like a Venus flytrap. If it feels an insect there, it might close. Photoperiodism, based on how much light there is, determines when plants will produce their flowers and when they might grow. And then just know that plants can also become dormant, which means that they kind of stop what they're doing. They go almost into like a hibernation state, and that's a response to cold weather. And now that it's warm, they're kind of coming out of that dormancy and really starting to bloom and blossom. All right. What are 3 ways that pollen or seeds can be dispersed in the environment? Select all that are true. Wind, animals, and water. All right, what does it mean if a seed is dormant? If the seed is dormant, it's responding to cold weather. It will not germinate until the time is right. What is phototrophism? That means growing towards light. What is gravitrophism? That's growing against the force of gravity, so like upward. And when do plants usually become dormant? That's usually in the winter when it's cold. All right, last thing that plants can do is they can adapt to many different environments. So certain plants are adapted for aquatic life, like they have air sacs in their tissues that help diffuse oxygen, and they have seeds that can float to make sure that they would go and be able to germinate somewhere. We also have plants like these mangroves that are adapted to salty conditions. So they have leaves that pump salt out, and they have specialized root systems so that they don't get too much salt within the plant. We have plants that are able to live in the desert, and they have more roots that go like stretch very far throughout the desert. They have fewer leaves. In fact, on a cactus, the leaves are actually the needles. Like they're very small and they're not that many. And then they have thick stems. So these are actually the stems, this part that you can see on a cactus. And then we also have plants that are adapted to live in dense jungle areas, and those are things like air plants and orchids. They can grow on other plants, and they are actually able to collect their own water and nutrients because of the way that their leaves and stems are shaped. We can also have plants that adapt to meet nutritional needs. So certain plants are carnivorous, and that means they'll get more nitrogen than what the soil where they live provides by eating insects. So you can see that happening here in a pitcher plant. If there's not enough nitrogen in their environment, they'll actually consume living insects. So that's kind of interesting. And then we also have plants that are parasites, and they can take their nutrients or water from a host. Mistletoe is actually an example of a parasite plant that grows on other plants. Another example is called the strangler fig. But there's all types of different plants that can grow on other plants and take nutrients and water from them. And sometimes we even have plants that are adapted for chemical defense. So chemical defenses allow plants to protect themselves against insects and other plant eaters. So things like poison ivy, poison oak will, stop humans from going in a certain area where those plants, which really helps them avoid being trampled. This is basil. Basil has some natural chemical defenses that deters insects. So that can kind of stop insects from wanting to go and eat their leaves, and that protects them. Those chemicals that are actually used for plants' chemical defenses have actually been used by humans a lot of times for medical applications, like making aspirin and codeine and other medications that help people. So, what are some extreme environments that plants have been able to adapt to? Aquatic environments, salty environments, desert environments, and dense jungle environments. How can some plants get more nitrogen than their soil can provide? Some are carnivorous. And what kind of plants take nutrients from other plants? Those are parasitic plants. And how can plants defend against insects and other animals? Chemical defenses. Thank you so much for listening.